Hello again, chess friends. The position in front of us requires white to deliver checkmate in 3 moves. Just looking at this position, it's pretty straightforward to see that white, with this move, would threaten checkmate, checkmate, and because he covers this flight square, he could move the rook here, and that would also be checkmate. The problem with that, of course, is that this rook would be able to deliver check here and ruin the checkmate in 3 moves. So an immediate knight e5 is out of the question. But it should be kept in mind more, and there's a clue here, more of a threat than an actuality. So just keep that one in mind. Also, taking the pawn here would be of no use because white continues to cover the f-line, but he might get it into his head to play here with the possibility of playing here and giving him a flight square. However, if he were to ever play this, then quite clearly bishop g5, checkmate. Now bishop g5 does feature in one of the lines, so just keep that one in mind. Also here, white would like to play this, threatening checkmate here. However, rook takes here would defend against it. So, also bearing in mind, that is the start position, should this knight move, the rook is not covered. So, just take a look at that position and think about what I've said so far. Okay, we need a waiting move here in order to prepare knight e5. Now, usually the waiting move, but not always, but usually it tends to be with the king. Now, with the king here, it's pretty obvious because we can't really afford to move this knight to e5 without subjecting ourselves to check. So to move the king away would be an obvious choice. So clearly, moving it to these 3 squares would not gain us anything because the rook would still be able to check. So it's one of these 2. And we need the king on one of these 2 in order to cover the rook so that then the knight is free to move. So the task that we must set ourselves here is to decide which one. Now, the problem would never allow either king to provide the solution, so it must be one or the other and not both. So the question is, which one is it? Does it work if we play king c3? Well, let's just take a quick look at it. If we play king c3, the threat now is knight e5, followed by those mates that I referred to earlier on. There's no doubt about that. However, black refutes this by playing rook here. We don't need to go into anything else. This is how I solved this and how I came up with the solution, and I was proved to be quite right. You just need to refute it in one line and it's cooked. So how does it cook it here? Can you see it? Well, quite simply, if he plays knight e5, black is free to take the knight. So that doesn't work. Equally, the bishop is here. If he plays bishop here, threatening mate, it isn't threatened at all because the rook covers the pawn. So that's stopped. And if he plays bishop g5, threatening bishop f4, the rook can take the bishop. So none of that works. And also, should he play knight to here, threatening knight c4 mate, he's now free to take the knight covering c4. So let's just put all of that back and let's figure out why the other move, king c1, should make such a vital difference. Just take a look at that's the starting position. I've made no mistake with the bishop this time. Okay, that's the starting position with the king on b2. So we've tried king c3, and because of rook h5, we've figured out that it doesn't work. So let's have a look at king c1. Right. Well, everything works with king c1 and king c3, except in the case of king c3, as we've just demonstrated, rook h5 doesn't. Now, rook h5 is not an adequate defense against king c1, but let's just have a look at the other moves. So we just played king c1. Well, the first one is what happens after bishop takes f7, removing the knight and removing the threat of knight e5. Well, what we do then is we play here. And you notice there's no defense to bishop f4 mate. Had the bishop not been here, the rook could have defended. So that's bishop f7 out the way. What about rook f7? Do it the other way this time. What happens then? Well, then we have knight a3, and as you saw with king c3, this rook is in the way here to defend against knight c4. So the rook is in the way of the bishop here. The bishop was in the way of the rook before. Very interesting. So that doesn't work. So that's two lines out the way, bishop f7 and rook f7. What else is there? Well, there's bishop h5. What happens here? Well, with bishop h5, we play here, and you notice the bishop is in the way of the rook coming to here and defending against this, so there's no defense to bishop c5 mate. So bishop h5 does not work. That's 3 of the 4 lines. And like I say, all of those would be successful if the king were on c3. There'd be no problem at all. The problem arises with this, but this time the problem is with black, not with white. Now, why should it make such a difference moving the king to c1 instead of c3? Can you see it? Well, because when the king is on c3, this square is blocked, whereas after rook h5, white is able to play here. Now, this time, as is always the case in these lines, one piece is blocking the other. This time with the rook here. Should the bishop have been able to have played here, there'd have been a defense to knight d1. And now, try as you might, there is no defense to stop white playing this on the next move. And that is checkmate in 3. And there lies the subtle difference between the two king moves. As someone observed looking at this position, the 4 defenses available to black involve a move of a black piece on its first move to a square needed by another black piece at move number 2. And I couldn't put it better myself. I hope you enjoyed this as I thoroughly did, and goodbye for now.